You are looking at a medical impossibility. In the history of the human species, thousands of languages have lived, and thousands have died. And once a language dies, once it stops being spoken by mothers to their children, once it stops evolving in the streets, it stays dead. Latin is dead. Sanskrit is dead. They are beautiful corpses, preserved in books and rituals, but they do not breathe, except for one. There is exactly one zombie language in human history, one language that flatlined for 2,000 years, was buried under the sands of exile, and then, against every rule of linguistics and sociology, clawed its way back out of the grave. That language is Hebrew. So how did it happen? How do you take a language that was frozen in religious texts, a language used only to talk to God, and turn it into a language you use to buy groceries, shout at bad drivers, and write computer code? This isn't just a history lesson. This is the story of the most successful, impossible linguistic experiment ever conducted. And to understand how it came back to life, we first have to understand how it was born in the dust of the desert. Our story doesn't begin in a library or a palace. It begins in a hole in the ground. Rewind to around 1800 BCE. We are in the brutal, sun-scorched turquoise mines of Serabit el-Qadim in the Sinai Peninsula. The workers here are Semitic migrants, laborers, hacking at the rock for their Egyptian masters. Every day, they see the Egyptians using hieroglyphs, these magnificent, intricate pictures of birds, snakes, and eyes. It looks like magic. It's a technology that preserves thought. But there is a problem. The Egyptian system is a gatekeeper. It has hundreds of symbols. It takes a lifetime of scribal training to master. These miners don't have lifetimes. They have quotas. But they want to write. They want to record their names, their prayers. So, in a moment of pure, desperate genius, they hack the system. They decide to ignore the complex meaning of the Egyptian pictures and focus only on the sound. This is the invention of the alphabet. It's the acrophonic principle, and it works like this. Take the word for ox. In their language, it's aluf, or aleph. They draw a crude, quick sketch of an ox's head. But instead of meaning ox, that picture now represents just the first sound of the word ah. They take the word for house, bait. They draw the floor plan of a house. That picture becomes the sound b. Water is mayim. They draw a jagged wave. That becomes m. Do you realize what you are doing every time you write the letter A today? You are drawing that ancient ox head. Over centuries, the Phoenicians turned it on its side. The Greeks didn't need the glottal stop, so they turned it into the vowel alpha and flipped it upside down. But the DNA is undeniable. That A is a 3,800-year-old sketch from a Sinai miner. You are writing in the ghost of Proto-Sinaitic every single day. This raw, democratized script evolves. It travels north. It becomes the script of the Canaanites, and eventually the Israelites. By the 10th century BCE, we see it solidified on artifacts like the Gezer calendar. This small limestone tablet isn't a royal decree. It's likely a schoolboy's homework, a rhythmic poem about the agricultural year. 2 months of harvest, 2 months of sowing. It's rough. It's rural. It proves that Hebrew wasn't just for priests. It was for the people who got their hands dirty. Then comes the Golden Age. From 1000 to 586 BCE, Hebrew grows up. It becomes the language of the First Temple, of King David, of the great prophets. This is standard biblical Hebrew, and it is an acoustic masterpiece. It utilizes a grammatical feature called smikhut construct state, where nouns are chained together to create long, flowing rivers of meaning. It's a language built for poetry, for chanting, for memorization. We find it carved into the bedrock of Jerusalem itself. In the Siloam Tunnel, an inscription describes the moment two teams of diggers tunneling through solid rock from opposite ends finally met. It captures the excitement, the sound of pickaxes striking stone, the voices calling out. It is a snapshot of a living, breathing city where Hebrew was the sound of the streets. But languages are fragile things. They need a safe harbor to survive. And in 586 BCE, Hebrew lost its home. The Babylonian Empire descends. They flatten Jerusalem. They burn the temple. But the real blow to the language happens next. They exile the elite, the scribes, the cultural guardians. These Jews are dragged to Babylon, the heart of a different empire, where everyone speaks Aramaic. Aramaic is the linguistic steamroller of the ancient Near East. It is similar to Hebrew, a sister language, which actually makes it more dangerous. It's easy to switch. Slowly, inevitably, the mother tongue begins to slip. By the time the Jews return to build the Second Temple, the street language has shifted. Hebrew is becoming highbrow, liturgical. The market language is Aramaic. Later, it's Greek. The final nail in the coffin comes with the Roman destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, followed by the Bar Kokhba revolt in 135 CE. The Jewish people are shattered and scattered. The geographic concentration needed to keep a vernacular language alive is gone. And so, around the year 200 CE, something tragic happens. The last child who speaks Hebrew as a native mother tongue grows up and dies. For the next 1,700 years, silence. Well, not total silence. This is the paradox. Hebrew didn't die like the dinosaurs. It was cryogenically frozen. It became the holy tongue, Lashon HaKodesh. It was used to write philosophy, to compose poetry in medieval Spain, to codify law in the Mishnah, but it was a language of the eye and the mind, not the mouth and the heart. Nobody shouted in Hebrew. Nobody whispered, "I love you" in Hebrew. Nobody struggled to find the word for screwdriver. It should have stayed that way. But in the late 19th century, a man named Eliezer Perlman, later Eliezer Ben Yehuda, decided to do the impossible. Ben Yehuda wasn't just a linguist. He was a fanatic. He was possessed by an idea that was spreading across Europe: nationalism. He believed that if the Jewish people were ever to return to their ancestral land and be a real nation, they couldn't speak the languages of their exile. They couldn't speak Yiddish or Russian. They needed their own voice back. He moves to Palestine in 1881 and declares a personal war on reality. He creates the first Hebrew-speaking household in nearly 2 millennia. But think about the practicality of that. How do you raise a child in a language that lacks words for modern life? When his son, Ben Zion, is born, Ben Yehuda becomes a warden. He forbids his wife from singing lullabies in her native Russian. He isolates the boy from other children so he won't hear a word of Arabic or Yiddish. He wants to create the first Hebrew native speaker. It sounds cruel, and in many ways it was, but it worked. Ben Yehuda had to become a one-man factory for words. The Bible doesn't have a word for ice cream. It doesn't have a word for bicycle or newspaper or tomato. He had to engineer them. He dug into ancient roots to manufacture modern utility. He took the root for ice and created glida, ice cream. He took the word for count and built Mahshev, computer. He was mocked. The ultra-Orthodox in Jerusalem wanted to stone him. They believed Hebrew was too holy for buying vegetables. The secularists thought he was a dreamer. But the movement caught fire in the one place that matters most: the classroom. A generation of idealistic teachers started teaching chemistry, geography, and math entirely in Hebrew. They didn't even have textbooks. They were making up the terminology on the fly, writing it on the chalkboard 1 minute before the students walked in. But the children absorbed it. They took these sterile, invented words and took them out to the playground. They started using them to play tag, to fight, to gossip. That is the moment the heart started beating again. When a language moves from the teacher to the student, it's education. But when it moves from child to child, unsupervised, that is resurrection. By the time the State of Israel is established in 1948, the miracle is complete. Hebrew becomes the official language of the state. It becomes the great equalizer. You have refugees pouring in from Morocco, Poland, Yemen, Iraq, all speaking different tongues. The army and the schools force them into one linguistic funnel. The result is modern Hebrew, or Ivrit. Today, if you walk down the streets of Tel Aviv, you are hearing a linguistic Frankenstein in the most beautiful sense. You'll hear a sentence that starts with a verb from the Bible, uses a noun invented by Ben Yehuda, throws in a slang word from Arabic, and ends with a technical term from English. It is a language that has traveled from the slave mines of Sinai through the lips of King David into the silence of a 2,000-year exile and back into the sunlight. It is the only time in human history we have ever pressed rewind on a dead language and successfully hit play. It proves that a language is more than just a tool for communication. It is the operating system of a culture. And as long as people are willing to speak it, it can never truly die. If you want to understand more about the hidden history behind the words we use every day, you need to click this video right here. And if you're amazed by the survival of Hebrew, hit subscribe, because we are just scratching the surface of history's greatest comebacks. Thanks for watching.